I think for many of us who are Gen X, especially those born kind of near the end of those years, like myself, and this may be being a little presumptuous, but I feel like a lot of us will probably consider this to be in their top 10 Christmas viewing list. And that film that we are about to discuss is none other than the 1988 comedy fantasy Scrooged, starring Bill Murray, directed by Richard Donner. In this video, I'm going to talk about the story, I'm going to talk about the characters, I'm going to talk about this 4K release, and I'm going to go ahead and introduce myself. I'm Dave Watkins, Watkins Films, and if you haven't done so already, if you go ahead and like this video, subscribe to my channel, hit that bell thing. So this movie is based on Charles Dickens' novel, A Christmas Carol, obviously. Well, it may not be so obvious. Some people might be like, really? It's based on A Christmas Carol? I didn't know that. But now you know. The film I think that is most accurate to Charles Dickens' story is this one here. It stars Jim Carrey. It doesn't quite work. It is very dark, and it's like they got the uncanny valley going on. They did the motion capture, kind of like a Polar Express, and everyone just looks really bizarre in it, even though it has a terrific cast. They've done tons of different remakes, like Scrooge. This one has Albert Finney and Alec Guinness plays Jacob Marley. And of course, like the George C. Scott version, I think that one may be a lot of people's favorite version. I think he does a terrific job, especially when he's playing the mean version of the Scrooge. But to me, I think the best version of this to date is the Muppet Christmas Carol with Michael Caine, and I really like his transformation in the film. Now, of course, we probably all familiar with the Christmas Carol and the story, but let's go ahead and talk about the story anyway before we get into the story of Scrooge. Now, Christmas Carol, the novel by Charles Dickens, the main character is Ebenezer Scrooge. He was a miser who is like a person who has a lot of money, but he hoards it, and he doesn't spend it on anybody. He doesn't pay his employees right, and he doesn't even buy stuff for himself. That's how cheap he is. He lives in that one. He lives in his old business partner's Jacob Marley's house that he inherited after Jacob Marley died. But he lives in the house, and it's a big house, but he basically doesn't use the heat, and he just has a fireplace where he goes into one room, closes it off, and uses the fireplace, and he eats like some shitty stuff because he doesn't want to spend the money on better food. So it's interesting that he doesn't even take care of himself in a way, but he makes it even worse for anybody around him. Like his employee Bob Cratchit, he doesn't treat him very nice. He doesn't pay him well, and everyone around town just knows he's just kind of an asshole for the most part. It's a good way to describe it. Now, Scrooge here is a modern retelling of the story, and it does what I think is probably unique to this film. It does do a few things differently. Like, for instance, the character Frank, which is based on Ebenezer Scrooge, played by Bill Murray, is a younger guy. He's not, he's a middle-aged type of guy. He's a lot younger than the old man Scrooge is typically. And also, they treat it like a comedy, which is new to it. Bill Murray originally didn't want to do it. He got the script, and he passed on it. A few years later, he started thinking about it. He's like, well, this would actually might work pretty good as a comedy, and it did work good. It came out, and they made a lot of money off of it. Now, a lot of people have it on their top 10 Christmas list of films that they're going to watch every year. But here, they not only make him young, they also add in more of the love interest. Now, the love interest, Belle, in the original, her name is Claire in this one, but Belle in the original one is really not. She's not in it as much. It's more of a tragic thing that happens in the past in the original one. I think a very good. In the Muppet Christmas Carol, there's actually a deleted scene. Now, this is the DVD version. I really wish they would come out with a 4K version of this, but as long as it has the deleted scene on it. Now, there's two versions of this on here. One of the two versions has the deleted scene where in the past, like there's a song between Belle and the young Ebenezer Scrooge where she leaves him. Now, she gives him an opportunity to not leave, but he doesn't listen to what she's saying, so she leaves and he loses her. And it's a very tragic scene, and they cut it from this film because this film is typically whimsical, and they do a good job. This one is more of a comedy, and they do a good job with those elements, but they also treat, which is the darker part of the story, it's still there, but it's overshadowed by some of the whimsical stuff the Muppets do. But it actually works. It's a good way to tell this particularly dark story. It is dark until the end of it, of course. Because what happens at the end, which I'm sure everybody knows, in the original Christmas Carol, like what happens is the character Ebenezer Scrooge, his business partner comes to him. He's dead to begin with, but he's dead. He shows up as a ghost, and he tells him he's got to change his ways, or he's going to be he's basically going to carry all these chains with him in eternity. So he tells him he's going to be visited by 3 ghosts, and then if he doesn't change his mind, then he's screwed. He's given him an opportunity to make a better choices for his life, and so he sends 3 ghosts, and after the third one, he ends up having a epiphany, and he changes his life, or it does seem to be that's the way. So it has a very happy ending and a very emotional ending in the original story, and it's done very well, especially in A Muppet Christmas Carol. But let's talk about Scrooged in relationship to that. Bill Murray plays Frank Cross, who is the head of a television station. He's running this TV station, and he's pushing some violent content. Now, what they're showing isn't necessarily violent. They're actually putting on a live show of A Christmas Carol during the film on Christmas Eve. That's what his station's putting on, and they're really, which actually, while the movie's going on, they are actively rehearsing and they're shooting it, so it has a nice parallel going on with the play within the story as it's going on. It's almost kind of like a meta sort of thing, which actually works very well within this film. But Bill Murray is this executive, and he's having to sell this idea. He wants people to watch this Christmas Carol, live Christmas Carol, which is like, I mean, I think it'd be pretty cool to see it myself, but I guess at this time, 1988, he's thinking people aren't just going to watch A Christmas Carol. So he comes up with this violent content. He puts out this trailer that has people getting shot, like helicopters blowing up and all this other stuff. And he's like, you better watch it or else, sort of thing. And then, so that's what at the very first scene, he shows that trailer to all these ad executives in this room. But right before he shows the trailer, it has like 3 other advertisements. The first one of the bunch, and they're all kind of spoofy. The first one is an advertisement for a movie called The Night the Reindeer Died, which is basically Santa Claus being, like, I think Russian spies or have found Santa's workshop, and they're coming in on him, and they're about to kill Santa, but Lee Major shows up to save him, and then Santa's like, oh, Lee Major's the $5,000 man. He's like, Lee, just so you know, you've been a real good boy this year. You know, and it's actually a pretty hilarious scene in Lee Majors, and it helps Santa Claus like kill the Russians or whatever. Santa Claus is like, this is one Santa Claus that is going out the front door. I was reading about it. Apparently, Lee Marvin was originally supposed to play the Santa Claus, but he died before they were able to shoot it. But anyway, so after Frank shows that trailer about everyone, like, you watch the Christmas Carol live or else you're going to get blown up. The ad executives are all like very disturbed by it, but they don't want to say too much because he's in charge and he's kind of an asshole, and they don't want to lose their jobs. All but one. Now, and his name's Elliot Loudermilk, and he's played by Bobcat Goldthwait. Now, this Bobcat Goldthwait here is kind of cast against type, it seems at first. Because you typically know him for his voice. He's got this. He's a comedian, but he seems to be playing a very mild-mannered. There's 2 characters in this film that are kind of embody the Bob Cratchit character. He's one of the 2. I mean, he seems really mild-mannered, and he's like, look, we can't show this trailer because it's going to make people sick or whatever. And then so Bill Murray fires him, and then it shows him throughout the rest of the movie in different stages of homelessness, and he eventually gets very psychotic, and he comes back and tries to kill Bill Murray with a gun, which is more along the lines of something you would expect Bobcat Goldthwait in this time period to be playing. So they cast him to play that more outrageous part of the character, but I think he does a really nice job playing the understated part at the beginning, and it would have been interesting if he kind of kept that and didn't go so crazy with it, but it still works. Now, I mean, it was cool to see him, especially at the beginning, playing a different type of part. The second Bob Cratchit character in the film is played by Alfre Woodard. She plays Frank's, which is Bill Murray's assistant. She makes all his schedules and things like that. Her name's Grace, and he treats her poorly, just like typically Ebenezer Scrooge treats Bob Cratchit poorly. But here she's got a son, kind of like Tiny Tim, and the son is mute. He doesn't talk, and in fact, he saw his father murdered apparently, and he hasn't spoken since that happened. and that is kind of the Tiny Tim character in this movie. The supporting cast here is pretty stacked. They even got Robert Mitchum in the film as the main boss. He's the big studio boss, and he comes in and he's kind of like a little, he's an older guy, and he's kind of like a little out there, and he comes in and talks to Bill Murray's character at one point, and he's like, "Hey man," he's like, "Look." He's like, well, we need to add into this A Christmas Carol live production. He's like, we gotta get some animal stuff in there. We gotta put some mice in there because we gotta attract cats and dogs. He's found, like, from looking at stuff, that cats and dogs are now watching TV, which apparently is not all that crazy. They've kind of started in some instances targeting shows towards cats and dogs, but he says they can be an audience, and he wants them to add some pet appeal into the thing, which is kind of adds a new challenge for him. He's got to go get some mice, and they got to have him in there. Also, John Glover is in it. He plays a guy that Robert Mitchum's character hires to kind of help Frank, but he's clearly trying to take his job over. So he shows up being super obnoxious and probably completely unhelpful. So Frank's old boss, who's now dead, like Jacob Marley was to begin with, named Lou, he's played by John Forsythe. He shows up at Bill Murray's office, and he does what Jacob Marley typically does. He tells him that he's dead, and and Bill Murray's in a lot of trouble unless he changes his ways. He doesn't want him to have the same thing that's happened to him, and he looks like a zombie, really. And he grabs Bill Murray by the neck. He shoves him through the friggin' window, and then Bill Murray tries to grab his arm back, and his whole arm breaks off, and then he falls. Bill Murray falls and dies in traffic, but he wakes up. It was all a dream, or was it? And then he immediately, at that point, calls. The phone calls it for him. He calls his old girlfriend, Claire, played by Karen Allen. I think most people probably know her from either Raiders of the Lost Ark, where she plays Indiana Jones's love interest Marion, or the Starman film. But she's very well cast here. She's a very likable actress, and she's got those kind of doe eyes. She's very, very beautiful. And so he in the past, she's kind of the Belle character here, where he lost her in the past, and stupidly to the network in a very painful scene that you do see later in the film in the past part. But anyway, he calls her, which brings that character to present day, and she shows up to talk to him. And so that kind of is able to bring that love interest back into present day time, which they don't do that usually. They do it maybe on the Hallmark Channel ones after this one. I think this might be the first time that this plotline happened, and it actually works very well within the film, and it makes it a lot different. I like it that he has a second chance with Claire, the Claire character. So eventually he is visited by three ghosts. The Ghost of Christmas Past. Here he's a cab driver played by David Johansen. And apparently Sam Kinison was originally supposed to play the part, or they wanted him to play the part, but Bill Murray wanted David Johansen to play it instead. But he does a very good job. He's very convincing as a cab driver. I could see Sam Kinison doing this role as well. The way that he does his acting style is very similar to the way David Johansen acts, but it would have worked either way. But so he's basically a cab driver, and he brings him back. He shows him things in his past, like his parents, and he ends up showing him the stuff with Claire when they were younger and all the big mistakes. The past is usually fairly emotional part. It may be harder for some people to watch in some of the films. It lingers on a little bit, but it doesn't stay there too long. Now, the most hilarious ghost is the second one, played by, again, this is a comedy, so a lot of times they really push the envelope on the comedy in some scenes. They even get some physical comedy in some areas. But so they bring on Carol Kane, plays the Ghost of Christmas Present, and she shows up in like a weird wings and like an angel type of dress, like a pixie dress, and she comes in. She's like a manic character, and she comes in and she just starts beating the shit out of him for some reason. She kicks him and hits him, slaps the shit out of him, and it's hilarious though. And apparently while they were shooting it, Carol Kane accidentally hurt Bill Murray. She pulls his lip down and it actually hurt him. I think they had to stop shooting for a few days until it healed. But she's damn hilarious, and she's just on another level. The way she plays this character in this film is just manic and hilarious, and it's kind of like a psycho but crazy sort of character. But she keeps and then at one point she picks up a toaster. She's like, "Hey, look at this toaster!" Bam! It hits him right in the head with it. It's great. But so she shows him the present, and he sees. By the way, Bill Murray's, a lot of his family members are in this film. Like Brian Doyle Murray, one of his brothers plays his dad, and both of his other brothers are also in this. One of them plays his brother in the film. John Murray, I think his name is. Now, John Murray, I recognized him when I first saw this film because I saw this other movie called Moving Violations, where he is the main character in that. I'm surprised he didn't have a bigger career because he's pretty good in this and in Moving Violations, from what I remember. But at the time when I saw Moving Violations, it was a movie that I saw a lot when I was younger because it was on TV. And I mean, for some reason I thought he was like a bigger star, but apparently that was about one of the few things that he did. But he's pretty funny from what I remember in that. So then the last ghost, the ghost of the future, who's always the scariest ghost. And as you can see on the front cover of this thing, he's got the skeleton is more of a horror sort of part once that one comes in. I remember as a kid, there's a Disney version of this that was a cartoon, and that part really scared me because he falls into the grave, and I remember that kind of scaring me as a kid. But here he's pretty scary in this one, but he shows up and he's got the skeleton hand. There's a scene where Bill Murray's watching TV and he comes behind him like this, but that's not where he really shows up. Later on, he does show up, and his face looks like a television screen. It shows a bunch of like weird stuff on his face, and it kind of matches the theme of the television executive in the show, so it kind of works with that. And then the future shows him a bunch of really bad stuff that happens in the future, and then it shows Bill Murray's character in a coffin dead. Then he wakes up and he's not dead, and then he has an epiphany and changes his ways. In this one, the way that he once he wakes up and realizes that he's been living his life the wrong way, he goes to the set. The live Christmas event is still on, and in it, the Ebenezer Scrooge character comes to the window and he has the coin. It's like that scene where he flips the coin and then the kid catches it and he's like, "Hey kid, go get me the biggest turkey in the window and bring it over to Bob Cratchit's house." Pretty much what he does, but he flips the coin, and then Bill Murray, as Frank steps on, grabs the coin, and then he takes over the live broadcast, and he starts telling everybody on TV about how they need to appreciate Christmas and the Christmas spirit, like the day of, really grab it by the horns or whatnot. So he goes on to this big monologue. Apparently Bill Murray ad-libbed most of it. I remember watching it the first time, and I thought it worked fine. I didn't have a problem with it, but now that I'm thinking about it more, it works from a movie's perspective because you're watching a movie about Bill Murray's character, and as an audience member, you're watching this character go from the beginning of the film to the end. But if you think about it, the people at home, they're watching a live broadcast of A Christmas Carol. And they've been following the Ebenezer Scrooge character here, played by Buddy Hackett. Now, this character, they're basically right at the end when the character has the transition, like some random guy, some executive nobody knows, just steps on it and just starts like spewing like that must have been so jarring. If in real life, if anybody was watching that, it would be so jarring. And can you imagine being that actor, like the Buddy Hackett's character, playing himself? But can you imagine you're playing Ebenezer Scrooge on a live television event, and then some dude walks in and takes over? It just that would it's I don't know. But anyway, within the movie it works. But if you think about it too much, it's like that's kind of an odd thing to do. All right, now let's take a quick peek at this release. So here I do have a slipcover on this, the 4K slipcover. Very nice. And on the inside of it, we have a slightly different variation of this cover, which also is very nice. On the inside of it, we only have one disc, unfortunately. It's just a 4K disc. But guess what? I do have the VHS version of the film, which is cool because I was able to take this version and I was able to pop these both in and look at them and compare them. And really, the VHS didn't look as bad as I was expecting it to. Now, obviously, there's not going to be as much detail. With the 4K, you got a lot better resolution. But I could have probably watched this without being too distracted by the quality of it. But here, you do see, if you look at this one, it is a lot brighter. Like everything is brighter, and a lot of it is because the blacks here in the 4K, they're much deeper blacks, and they look better. But it does make the picture look a little darker throughout. And that's the cool thing about this one. Does a very good job of keeping true to the original source material. I think the 4K upgrade here is very well done. I don't see a lot of, you see some film grade in there, but it all looks natural. I don't think that they did a lot to clean this up, but didn't need to be cleaned up because it looks terrific already. So let's go ahead and give this thing a rating. Out of a scale from 1 to 5, 1 being the lowest, I'm going to rate the film. I'm going to give it a 4-star rating. I really like it, probably more than most people do. Now, what's interesting about Bill Murray's performance, and it is really kind of a big performance in some ways. Sometimes he goes a little bit bigger on screen than probably needed for the scene. Apparently, that was from Richard Donner's direction, Bill Murray said that he just kept telling him to go louder and louder and go bigger with some scenes, and he's like, I thought that director must have been deaf or something, but it actually works pretty good for the most part. I could see I could see it maybe being fine tuned a little bit, but I do like his energy here. It goes very well, and he comes off very unlikable at first, maybe a little loud, but he is like supposed to be that way. As far as this release, Paramount did a good job here, especially with the 4K transfer. I'm going to give them a 4-star release. Let me know what your opinion is about Scrooged, and if you think it is a top tier Christmas movie, if it's on your list of Christmas movies to watch every year or so. And if you haven't done so already, if you go ahead and like this video, subscribe to my channel. Merry Christmas. I'm Dave Watkins. Thanks for watching.